Good morning, everybody. It is a little bit before 7 a.m. here in Chicago on a Sunday. Very cold day. Temps are in the mid 30s and it's like misting out. Today, we're gonna go for a long run. We're about 4 weekends out from CIM. Today, we're gonna try to hit 22 miles. Turning it around, almost 4 miles into the run for today. Today's workout is going to be 4 miles at marathon pace, 1 mile float, a little bit more than a minute slower, and then repeat until I get to 22. .01 miles, 6 minutes, 58 seconds per mile, and 164 beats per minute today for a very difficult long run. I think that was probably the most difficult training run that I've ever attempted or completed. Not sure it was even a great idea. I just kind of made it up a couple of days ago and thought that it would work. But overall, feeling very confident that I completed it. Also feeling not that confident as well. We'll dive into it. I'll go over some more of the numbers. But overall, the structure of the workout was 4 times 4 miles at marathon effort, or slightly faster than marathon effort, and then with a 1 mile float at about a minute to a minute and 15 seconds slower than marathon pace. And doing that until I got to the 20 mile mark, and then tacking on another 2 miles at marathon effort for the day. So a total of 18 miles at marathon effort, spread across 22 miles. And that was really, really tough. So the purpose of the workout for today was, I wanted to get a long run in. That's just one of the basic things. I'm 4 weeks out now from CIM, or I'll be heading into 3 full weeks left, starting, I guess, tomorrow or today, the day that you see this. So I basically have kind of like 2 long runs left. And I wanted to give myself 2 attempts or 2 cracks at this workout in case it didn't go well today, or if the weather didn't work out well today, I could always scrap it, just go for a regular run, long run, and then try it again next week. It ended up being pretty decent conditions. There was some wind, and I had to do a little bit of rerouting to try and get on parts of the path that weren't quite as wind affected. But I felt like I was facing a little bit of headwind and a little bit of tailwind pretty much throughout the entire time, although there were some really nice spots where I felt either a side wind or no wind, which was really, really nice. So the point, other than getting in the long run, was to really practice feeling what marathon pace feels like without having to constantly look at my watch, and also to really dial in on like what's that gonna feel like, not just a couple miles at a time at the beginning of a workout or beginning of a long run, but what's that gonna feel like towards the end of a very long run. And so the whole point of it was to do a lot of those marathon effort miles and have the body spend a lot of time kind of like pushing at that level, so that way it knows what to expect, but also hopefully between now and CIM, that first weekend in December, build some adaptations, stress the body in a way that it can respond to do precisely what I'm asking it to do now and what I'll be asking it to do in California for CIM. I did have some concerns about it. A 22-mile long run is typically a little bit longer than I do for my longest runs in a marathon build. But I felt like since I was putting a couple of faster miles in it, or I was going to be doing all faster miles in this, faster than my easy pace anyway, I thought that it would be okay to go more than just the 20-mile mark and give myself just that much more confidence and that much more work, especially that later part in the workout where I could really focus on, digging deep once the body is starting to, not really feel like doing it anymore. But some of the concerns with that are, it is a lot of marathon effort miles to put in. 18 is quite a bit. 13 miles at marathon effort is usually the longest I ever do in a long run. So this was quite a departure from that. And the other thing is, even having now completed it, have I, emptied the tank too much before CIM, even though I'll have a good 4 weeks to kind of like recover and rebuild, although I won't start tapering for another full week from today. So let's talk about kind of like how I think that went. So I feel like I hit all the reps at the goal like pace. So the effort was, make it feel like I'm running a marathon. And I wanted those time hopefully to come in between 6:51, which is 3-hour pace. But realistically, knowing that, because of the way that I can never run the tangents perfectly, I'm going to be running a little bit longer than the 26.2. I need that pace to be somewhere closer to 6:45. And so for the most part, I either came under 6:51. I think 6:50 was my slowest 4-mile block. But a lot of them came right around that 6:46 to 6:43 range. So I feel like that's a really solid range for me to be in for those 4-mile blocks, plus that last 2-mile little add-on at the end to get from miles 20 to 22. So I'm feeling really good about that. The power number from that was anywhere between 269, I think was the lowest, to 274, but pretty consistently like right in that low 270s, which is about where I thought I needed to be. I was thinking that I'd be able to do it with 265 to 270, but now I'm seeing that I'm going to need a little bit more power input from me, or power output from me, I guess, to be able to kind of hit those paces. But even though that concerns me a little bit, I think that I am going to be able to kind of handle what's going on at that level for an extended period of time. Now, the other thing that I want to take a look at, and we'll take a look at my computer for this real quick, is some of the heart rates. So like the heart rate kind of fluctuates the entire time, as do the paces and the power and the cadence, all this other stuff that I'm looking at in Polar Flow. But the one thing that like really jumps out to me in this is that the heart rate does start to creep even at the same power output and at the same kind of pace output. It does start to creep starting at about like the 16-mile mark or so, which is usually about where things start to go a little bit sideways for me in a marathon. So that's makes about sense to me. But mile 16 through 19 over here, or 17 through 19 over here, the heart rate only got to about like 170 for a little bit, but it stayed kind of like under what I would normally consider to be my threshold heart rate, which is around like 171 to 174. That's when I was talking about threshold efforts. So I'm staying below that kind of like this entire time. Now, granted, I do have those float miles in there, which lets the heart rate reset quite a bit. But then, after the break, after mile 19, I had a 1-mile float. Then the heart rate came back down again really nicely, and I'm back again at kind of like normal, marathon effort heart rate, which is about like 165 to 170 for me. So feeling good that the heart rate wasn't going too crazy today. It did feel like I was working very, very hard towards the end, that I felt like I was really digging deep. But it's good to know from like, in terms of like the strain on the cardiovascular system, it was, handling it relatively well. So really excited to see that. Looking at the the floats, you know, I could see that I was at 755, 742, 746, and 758. So keeping it under 8 minutes per mile for the float, usually ending up being like a minute to a little bit more than a minute for the float. I'm relatively happy with that. And the idea with keeping those floats as under 8 minutes per mile rather than going to just like whatever easy pace for recovery was that I wanted the heart rate to recover so that way I can get in more than just 10, more than just 13 marathon effort miles without being like, you know, minimizing the amount of strain that puts on the body. But also by having those floats in there, it still kind of kept the heart rate up a little bit. I think that generally, I don't think it dipped down below like the 150s. So like it was still staying like relatively high. So let's look at this one. I think this was the lowest in terms of average heart rate for one of the floats. And if we look at the heart rate, you know, I'm coming in at 162 and at the lowest it's down to 150, right? But a lot of times it's at 155. So I feel like, you know, I've still got my foot on the gas a little bit. So it's not completely letting me rest. So I feel like I'm getting that like working at fatigue strain, which is what I was looking for, without kind of like completely emptying the tank, or at least that's the hope. I've never really seen a workout like this before, so I don't know if it makes no sense at all or if it makes a lot of sense. But for me, I think that even if physiologically it doesn't make, you know, the most sense, mentally for me, I feel like that's where I made the biggest breakthroughs on this workout, and I'm really excited about that. Is just being able to know that like I can still maintain those paces, even though it feels like I'm putting in a lot of work, and even though I feel like I can't go anymore. You know, I don't feel like I completely drained the tank, but there's a lot of times where I was like, yeah, maybe when I get to mile 20, I'll just do cool down miles, you know, and I decided not to do that. And I just pushed through to see if I can still squeeze out a couple more marathon pace miles. And I think like those kinds of little victories are really big deals for me in terms of confidence. And so feeling really good about it, and overall really excited about the progress. During these reps, there was a couple of things that I really wanted to focus on. And I think, again, kind of tied into that mental aspect, but this is very much, I think, physical, is that, you know, those reps were hard. And they were hard enough that, you know, my body got to that kind of panic moment of like, there's no way we're going to do this for 26 miles straight, let alone this like second 4 mile block or this third 4 mile block. And so whenever that thought kind of like creeped into my head, I would always just focus on being focused. I would focus on my foot strike. I would focus on snapping back my legs, picking my legs up behind me, and also driving up the knee as I'm moving forward to taking the next step. So focusing really on mechanics, running pretty, running tall, and making sure that things were moving as efficiently as possible, all while, you know, keeping an eye out farther down the road. You know, I have the tendency to either look down or just wander my eyes around kind of like haphazardly all over the place. And I feel like that's when a lot of my like pace meandering starts to happen in terms of like being able to or not being able to keep a consistent pace. So I feel like focusing on those as an exercise in and of themselves was really useful for me today. The other thing that I've realized over the past couple of long runs is that when I start to get, I mean, normally my foot strike isn't like completely like straightforward. My foot kind of hits sideways. It kind of kicks out a little bit. And especially when I'm tired in a lot of the threshold reps that I've been doing, the threshold mile repeats, or even longer than a mile repeat that I've been doing, I've been realizing that, or I've been feeling that as I'm kicking my foot out, I'm doing a little bit of kind of heel striking and almost like braking with this part of the shoe, an area that I typically get a lot of wear in. And that's slowing me down. I think I'm doing it because when I kick my foot out, I feel more stable. So I'm tired, so I feel like I need more stability. But I think as I've been focusing on moving that back inwards and staying efficient, a little bit more efficient than normal, I've been kind of staying off this spot. And I think that also helps kind of me stay efficient and maintain as much of the speed through the foot strike as possible. So that's been some progress that I've been thinking I've been making. Now let's talk about the nutrition for today. I took 4 gels with me. I took one about every 5 miles. I brought 2 Martin calves and then 2 regular Martin gels. And then I also in the pack had 16 ounces of Scratch, the super salty one. It has 1,000 milligrams of salt for 16 ounces. I don't think I drank even half of it, but it was good to have that. It's a lot easier for me to drink from that than it is to try and fiddle with like a flip belt bottle. But I don't always like to carry the whole pack in the wintertime. I don't mind as much because it does help you keep a little bit warmer, which was nice on a really cold day like it was out there today. And then the last thing, which may be the most important thing for a lot of you, is that I did have some problems with this shoe. Now, I've been talking about the Adios Pro 2 and how much I love it and how much of a great marathon shoe that I think it is. But I thought it was a fluke, but this is the second time now that this has happened to me, where right here under the pads of the foot and just the right foot for me, I was starting to feel a little bit of discomfort. So I think that either feels like, you know, there's something hard underneath here, so maybe the foam is like bottoming out for me, or I think some people might describe it as like the carbon fiber, I guess in this shoe, the carbon energy rods were kind of poking the bottom of my foot a little bit, although I don't think that that's really possible because they go up to the top. But whatever it is, it felt like there was some discomfort right here in my right foot. I kind of started noticing it today at around mile 9. By mile 12, I felt like it was a problem, and I felt like I had to rely on landing a little bit more midfoot and kind of trying to take some pressure off it and roll through the foot strike more rather than landing directly on the forefoot like I normally prefer to do. And then by mile 16 or so, it had disappeared. But it is enough of a concern that it has me kind of rethinking, is this going to be my marathon race shoe? Now, for me, normally when I get late into a marathon training block, this kind of pain in my right foot appears. It's not new. And it's usually somewhat shoe specific. So like if I switch to another shoe, I can usually avoid it. The last marathon training block, I didn't really have that problem at all. And I felt like I had a really good taper. So I didn't have any of that like foot pad issue for the Chicago Marathon. And I ran in the Metaspeed Sky, and that was great. And I had no issues at all. It's a symptom that a lot of you guys have been saying the way I describe it sounds like a Morton's neuroma, which I don't think it is, but it sounds like the symptom description sounds the same. And that's kind of what it feels like. So I was a little bit concerned that it resurfaced today and it was really distracting in that middle section of today's run. Ultimately, I ended up not really even noticing it anymore by the end of the run. But I do feel like, you know, it's just an extra concern that I have when there's a lot of other shoes that I think I can run in that I would also enjoy, maybe don't feel quite as like special to me as the Adios Pro 2 does. I just really love the bounce that I get from the Lightstrike Pro. But if I can avoid some of those potential foot pad issues, then it's something to consider. So next week, I think next week's long run, I've already done a 20-mile run in the RC Elite 2. I think maybe next week again, I'll put some more marathon pace miles into it and kind of see how that feels for that shoe, because if that one doesn't give me any problems next week, then that might be the shoe to bring. Ultimately, I think I'm going to end up bringing both shoes with me for this race. The Metaspeed Sky would also be another option that I would bring, but I just raced a marathon in that one. So I'm going to switch to a different shoe for CIM just to switch it up and race in some different options that I have. So I think between the Adios Pro 2 and the RC Elite 2, that's going to be it. Stay tuned, hit the subscribe button, so when you see the long run video from next week, you can see kind of how that goes. And then, you know, stay tuned as I get ready for CIM and which shoe I end up running in. I'm not sure at this point. Got to rethink it just a little bit. But overall, you know, today's run was fantastic. My toes do feel a little bit scrunched. The pads of my feet are both like a little bit tired, but as you would expect from a hard 22-mile run. So I'm feeling about how I think I should feel. So overall, not complaining too much, but if I can get a little bit better performance from a different shoe, or at least more comfort from a different shoe, that might be like just that little edge, or might be just the little difference that I need. So who knows? We'll see what happens. If you have any questions about anything I talked about today, feel free to put them in the comments down below, or better yet, feel free to stop by the live stream that I do Monday through Friday right here on YouTube. And I'd love to talk to you guys in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of the video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?